Our next early Christian artwork is the Church of Santa Sabina, which is also located in Rome. Now, art historians like to look at Santa Sabina not only because it's an early Christian church, but because it still stands. Unlike Old St. Peter's Basilica or others which have rapidly changed, we use Santa Sabina as a reference point for what other early Christian churches must have looked like. Now, it is located in Rome, and it is dedicated to Saint Sabina. Saint Sabina is a Roman woman who, during the time of Vespasian, had an extremely opulent, she was a wealthy woman who had this extremely beautiful, opulent villa on the outside of Rome, and she was murdered for becoming a Christian. So this site for her fellow Christians became a sacred site or a shrine to her. And then when the practice of the faith became legal, the site was converted into a church. So the church Santa Sabina, dedicated to the woman Sabina, who was murdered here for being a Christian way back in the time of Vespasian. Oh, I know, right? Okay, so here it is from the outside, and what we can see is very simple brickwork. And then we see these large windows. That's the clerestory. We're looking at the back, and this is the apse. So let's walk around to the front and walk inside. Here we are. Now, as I said, art historians like to look to Santa Sabina as an example of what Old St. Peter's would have looked like inside, what other early Christian churches would have looked like. And what we see is 2 rows of columns that create a central nave. Over the nave is a flat timber roof and a clerestory that lets the light in, and then a apse on one side, and the entrance allows for this unobstructed view on the opposite side. This is like standing inside of a Roman basilica in a Roman forum. And again, it makes sense because of the way that the faith is practiced. You're supposed to all be together in an interior space. You don't practice individually, you don't practice out in the open. So a basilica's rectilinear shape, the flat timber roof, offers the same kind of cohesion between the faith as it's been practiced for the last 300 years and this now legal practice of it. So when we look at Santa Sabina, we see the basilica shape, and then we also should imagine the opulence of the mosaics that would have lined the interior walls. On either side, they would have been covered in bright, brilliant mosaics featuring scenes from the life of Christ and the Bible. The columns, well, they are capitalized with Corinthian capitals, because remember, just because they are Christian, they are no less Roman. And so they're going to be using Roman elements of architecture, like rounded arches, Corinthian fluted columns. And again, like I said, imagine how they would have glittered in the candlelight from heavy candelabras and oil lamps burning, and the glitter of those mosaic tiles as they would flash in flames. Now, I also want to give us a few elements of vocabulary. We talked about the word pagan as being non-Christian, Jewish, or Muslim. And again, we'll get to the Muslim faith, we'll get to the Islamic world later in the semester. But let's talk about some other terms that we're going to be using quite often in this class, or you might hear used in discussions about Christian art. First, the word church, not temple. A church is a house of worship that allows for the people inside the space, right? A temple, no, you don't go in there. A church is a house where you are allowed to go inside for the worship. A cathedral is a specific type of church. Cathedral comes from the Latin for bishop's throne, because this is the principal church of a official in the Christian church called a bishop. Now, I should rewind and point to this hierarchy. We are going to be looking at the Christian faith as it relates to the Western world in Western Europe. And that element of the Christian world, or I should say of the Christian faith, is outlined in this hierarchy. The hierarchy starts at the bottom with parish priests, pastors. They are working directly with the people. And then the hierarchy of these priests, as they rise in power and control or influence over larger swaths of people and land, rise up to bishop, archbishop, cardinal, and then this group of cardinals has one principal cardinal that they vote on, who is referred to as the supreme pontiff or pope. So the cardinals get together and they vote a pope. Now this pope is believed to be the closest connection to God here on earth in the Roman Catholic Church, okay? I know that some students get really confused with this, and if you have any questions, I wish we had like a quick kind of way of communicating. I'm going to try to make a discussion board where you can just ask some quick questions about the material that we've covered in this week's class, because I know you have really good questions that other students have as well. So we have our hierarchy, and within this hierarchy is a bishop. A bishop is in control of a church called a cathedral. So if there is a bishop at this church, that church is immediately called a cathedral. Think of it this way: just as all squares are rectangles and not all rectangles are squares, all cathedrals are churches, but not all churches are cathedrals. All right? A chapel is a smaller place of worship. It's subordinate to a church, meaning that there is no priest or pastor. There is no priest or pastor that is directly connected to the chapel. Instead, the chapel is connected to a church which has a priest associated with it. Basilica. The word basilica, like Old St. Peter's Basilica, does not indicate it as a church or a cathedral. It is simply referring to the architectural structure itself. So a basilica shape, okay? Later, the term basilica will often be absorbed into the use as church, but you, after taking this art history class, know the origins of the word basilica is the rectilinear shape. Yes? Yes. Let's now stop this video and look at our next early Christian site.